Hello and welcome back to another Blurbal Reasoning. Today we are talking about The Gathering Storm, Book 12 out of 14 in the Wheel of Time. Blah blah blah, taking years to read through this series, blah blah blah, but it's getting really good, blah blah blah. You know what to expect. I'm going to try and refrain from the usual babble and just focus on the book. Because otherwise I'm just going to tell you that it was so good that I feel like I'm going to continue reading this non-stop from start to finish for the last two books. And it's just going to be another 4 months of silence before I post anything, and I'm going to look very silly. So anyway, The Gathering Storm is the first book written by Brandon Sanderson for the series, alongside, obviously, Robert Jordan's copious notes in various passages and bits and bobs. I am so looking forward to researching, just what it took to finish this series for another writer to do that when I'm done reading, because I want to be able to not have to worry about dodging spoilers while looking into, how they wrote the end of a series. They're going to be there, so I might as well leave it till I'm done. Also, I feel like I don't want it to taint my, how I'm reading the story. I don't want to be reading it going, this is included because Brandon needed to come up with a solution for this thing that was left wide open, etc. I just want to be immersed in the story until I'm done with it. But yeah, as I've probably mentioned in the series before, I'm a big Brandon Sanderson fan. I'm a big Brando Sando fan, and after reading the Mistborn stuff and the first two books of the Stormlight Archives, that's the name of it, I decided I wanted to read everything this man had ever done, and I actually decided to read the frickin' Wheel of Time series because, sorry, I'm recording this quite late in the day. I decided to read the Wheel of Time series because I was curious about the fact that Brandon Sanderson had ended it, as well as the usual moth to a flame thing I've got going on for any super long story. And the thing I was most curious about is, would I be able to tell? Would the writing style be very different? Would I be like, oh, this is clearly a different writer? And I'm gonna tell you, I don't know if it's just because I'm not literary enough, he says with his writing degree, but for the most part, no. Brandon Sanderson did a little prelude message at the start of this book saying that basically while most of the words were his, the overall story is still Robert Jordan's, but he's not gonna try and mimic Robert Jordan's style. As a writer myself, I have a lot of imposter syndrome when it comes to people talking about writing styles, because I feel like it's so hard to define what a writing style is. I'm aware that different books read differently, but it's hard for me to really pinpoint. If someone asked me to describe Brandon Sanderson's writing style, I don't know, maybe I'd be able to say his characters sometimes have quirky interactions that break up some of the more serious tones of a plot, but other than that, I wouldn't know what to tell you. The one thing I could say that made this book distinct to the ones before it is that there was a lot less time spent detailing various different characters who had little relevance to the plot, because as I've mentioned in the previous Blurbal Reasonings regarding the Wheel of Time, it felt like we would spend way more time than was necessary describing every character in the room and what they were wearing and how they all felt about each other before we started doing any storytelling. And I definitely noticed a lot less of this in this book. As for the events of the book itself, though, this book spent a long amount of time exploring Rand's psyche and his deepening darkness, to the point where I started to wonder what if Rand is the Dark One himself. And I no longer believe this theory based on the ending of this book, but I think it's worth elaborating on. The whole thing with the Wheel of Time is that, the Wheel of Time keeps turning, and ages that have once passed can come to pass again. And there was this one really fascinating lore tidbit that was just randomly dropped in the middle of a chapter, where Rand basically says through Luz Ferrin's memories that the whole issue that they had with the Dark One in the previous age was that they dug into his prison in order to try to gain this new power for themselves, this true power which Rand channels. And that led me to thinking okay, so where did the Dark One come from originally? I'd never given it thought before, which is kind of where this theory came from. And so much time was spent on the deepening darkness within Rand and his worsening moral code, I suppose, and what he's willing to do, and his lack of faith in humanity or his lack of will to actually save the world, that I did end up going, what if the whole Wheel of Time aspect of this series is the fact that Rand does kill the Dark One, but is then imprisoned and becomes the new Dark One, and it's just a constant cycle of him basically killing his future eviler self. It would tie pretty neatly into themes of how he promises Luz Theron that they can die. He's always wanting to die. But no, this book ended with Rand actually seeing the light and realizing why they constantly get reincarnated and stuff like that. And while I think there's still a lot more story to be told regarding that dark halo that surrounded him and how he clearly had an influence on like the crop failures and stuff through his Ta'veren ways. Like, this book is called The Gathering Storm. The Gathering Storm is very much Rand. As it turns out, his continued insistence on being the hardest man alive and the toughest and most ruthless man alive and just getting to the last battle no matter what, that almost drives him completely mad, I think. Like, at some point, I can't remember who says it, it might have been Cad Swain, it might have been Nynaeve or Min, but someone says, when they're talking about Rand's madness, they're like, yeah, okay, the power probably had something to do with that when there was a taint on the power, but have you considered the stresses we're putting him under? What if it's just because of that? Which I think is fascinating. I will say, talking of writing styles, I think one thing Brandon Sanderson does do a little bit more than Robert Jordan is he does directly tell the reader some things which before may have been left a little bit more to interpretation. I don't know if that's fair, but that's kind of how I feel like regarding this thing. Like, it's the kind of thing that people will probably have said in their reviews, etc., but it's not something that had been said in the actual books up until Brandon started writing them. I don't think it's a bad thing. I actually really welcome it. But yeah, I did love Rand's sulk at the end of the book where he was sat on the top of Dragon Mount, basically the darkest that he had ever gotten to. He wanted all of creation to end, and he was willing to help the Dark One do it. But before that, we saw his darkening ways by how he decided to use Balefire to cause collateral damage just so long that it was a way to kill one of the Forsaken for good. Semirog? I think it was Semirog he did that too, right? And then he almost annihilated that town, Farmadding. He almost annihilates Farmadding until Nynaeve manages to stop him, so he was definitely walking down a path of darkness, and I will be interested to see what happens with his character going forwards, because much like the cleansing of the taint on the male half of the Source, I was surprised that this was addressed before the very end of the story. I kind of thought that Rand's character would just grow harder and darker until the very end, to be honest. So I'll be curious to see what this version of Rand, who no longer hears Luz Theron's voice in his head, is going to be like. Like, Min had a viewing of Rand and Luz Theron merging, and that's very much what seems to happen here. And I'm curious as well as to the ramifications of that, because how much of Luz Theron's voice in his head is madness, and how much of it is like some quirk of the pattern where he can see his past life, because clearly it's not just, you know, a voice in his head that he's dreamed up, because he knows more than he should. So like, what are the, beyond Rand's personality, what are the actual like ramifications of this unity of this character? The other main thing I would say that this book was interested in was Egwene's rise to the White Tower and the Amelin seat, and I guess reforging the White Tower after it was broken. And every Egwene chapter in this book slapped, man. It was so good. Like, there have been times in this series, there have been plot lines that have been told to us methodically that I have just found super slow, and it's like, obviously what's going to happen at the end of this plotline is Nynaeve is going to figure out how to channel without having to be angry. We don't need to spend this long on it, you know? But I feel like Egwene was the opposite of that. Egwene becoming the Amelin seat and bringing the people in the White Tower onto her way of thinking was perfectly paced and was perfectly as interesting as it needed to be. And every chapter I was just egging her on more and more. The chapter called A Visit from Varen Sedai is one of the best chapters I've ever read in this entire series, when she reveals that she's Black Ajah, and basically just gives Egwene like these huge revelations from inside because of how she's getting around the whole oath about not telling anyone anything, etc. Now, Forgive me, I have been reading these books for 4 years. I can't remember if we knew that Varen was Black Aja already. If I remember right, I had cause, at least, to not be entirely surprised. I don't remember if it was outright revealed to us that she was Black Aja, or if it was like a, oh, that's suspicious kind of a thing, and I just bookmarked that in my mind. Unfortunately, I can no longer remember what that was. All the same, this was a really, really cool chapter, and I was just sat bolt upright the entire time going, what the fuck is happening? Like so many other things in this book, this particular chapter felt like the culmination of so many thousands of pages of lore, and like it felt like stuff is really beginning to pay off in this series now in these last 3 books. I should say last 4 books really, because I also really enjoyed the previous book. But yeah, it definitely feels like events are coming to a head now, and it's super exciting. There was also the whole Shan Chen attack on the White Tower, which I wasn't as crazy big a fan of, just because it's weird that Tuon is still like, I need to capture those Aes Sedai, those damn Maraftamani, and then we've got a character who's married to her and loves her, and I'm like, this is just kind of icky and weird. So still a little bit weird, trying to guess how all the stuff with the Shan Chen Empire is going to work out in the end. Like, you've got this weird prophecy about Rand bowing to the Empress, who is, of course, Tuon. I mean, we don't know that, but I have no cause to believe it would be anyone else. And it's just like, if he's not got this super dark personality anymore, if he's over a lot of his angst, for want of a better term, how do his new morals fit into him bowing to someone who wants to enslave an entire populace? That seems like something Dark Rand would do, not Rehab Rand. There were also some Matt chapters that I really enjoyed in this book, where they came across this village which had been touched by the Dark One, similar to in the previous book when Perrin found that village where the dead were walking or whatever. In this village, the entire town is cursed to go crazy at night and just murder each other and do horrible atrocities to each other, and then wake up the next morning with apparently no memory of it all, but I'm thinking they're like trauma blocking it or whatever. And it's to the point where they can even kill each other and they would still wake up just fine the next morning. That was such a fun little aside. Perrin didn't really get all that much attention in this book, but you know what? I'm fine with that. Perrin, you've had the spotlight for a lot recently. You can just kind of chill with Fail and try and fix your marriage or whatever. That storyline took a long time. I didn't hate it, but it's getting to the point where I'm looking back on the different storylines that have occurred in Wheel of Time, and I'm kind of assessing them like, how important was this particular storyline? Perrin and the Two Rivers, very important, very cool, very fan service. I loved it. Perrin having to rescue a kidnapped Fail. Did we need to have her get kidnapped and have Perrin chase her halfway across the country for a book or 2? And I mean, it's character building, I guess. But yeah. Anyway, that's not strictly something that happened in this book. I forgot to talk about Rand and Tam. Oh my god. When Tam showed up, my blood froze, because I've been anticipating that reunion for such a long time. And as Rand has continued to grow and change as a character, I've been going on in my head like, what the hell would that reunion even look like at this point? And of course, it occurred at the worst possible time within Rand's life. And when he finds out that the reunion was obviously manipulated into being by Cadsuane, that's when he has his basically a breakdown and ends up almost killing his dad and then running and then being like, who am I, what am I, etc. I do hope that those characters get a moment to speak again before all the shit hits the fan, because I obviously this reunion was going to serve a purpose within the larger plot of the story, but if we can take a minute to have Perrin chasing his wife halfway across the country, we can take a minute to let these two characters have another conversation, please. Anyway, I don't think I need to get into the minutiae of every single tiny little detail, because firstly, I read like the first half of this book at another time, and secondly, obviously I'm not very good at stringing together words at this time of night, but I do want to keep reading So I need to record this before I can keep reading, or it won't be a true summation of my thoughts after having read The Gathering Storm and not knowing any further plot information in The Towers of Midnight. But I hope this has been enjoyable to any of you who have also read thousands and thousands of pages of Wheel of Time and got to where I did, and then saw this video and went, oh, I wonder what this guy thought about it. We're so close to the end now, I can't quite believe it, but yeah, I'm loving every second. I do rate these books on like Goodreads and stuff. This is absolutely another 5-star book. So was the previous one, but goddamn, I don't see it slowing down at any point. And there's still so much we got to do. We got to save Moraine. We got to figure out what the hell we're doing with Ashan Chen. So I'm gonna get back to reading, and I will see you in the next one.